All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. Nikki, we are ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have back Nikki Eisenhauer. Nikki, welcome back.
Thank you for having me for round 2. I'm excited.
All right. So Nikki is a professional psychotherapist, international life coach, yoga teacher, and host of the podcast Emotional Badass, where Moxie Meets Mindful. In 2017, she launched a podcast to spread healing, empowerment, and hope to highly sensitive people, empaths, survivors, and seekers all over the world. Drawing from her personal experiences as a survivor of childhood abuse and the years she spent as a psychotherapist and life coach, Nikki mindfully designed the show to be the emotional education so many of us crave. All right, Nikki, so I wanted you back because, I mean, your whole story is very interesting, but I think one of the things that really got to me when we were talking was your acknowledgement and focus of the importance of basically being real and connecting, as a therapist and to clients and so forth. And I remember you said at one point you were talking about that. You were sharing that story to other therapists and you could sense them like, whoa, But anyway, I just wanted to open it up with that because you strike me as someone who's just like, very, you understand the importance of that. And that's not always easy to do that, to communicate that, to be that.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy. And I think I know that so well because I spent so much time in my life being such a strong people pleaser. I really, in my youth, I almost tried to like blend into the walls and just be whatever anybody else wanted or needed me to be. I was the little girl who, I had a big Catholic family. We would get together. In that way, we were really good as a family. We would get together with each other. We would visit with each other. I made everybody's birthday cake for years and years and years and years and years. And I loved it. But like, that was kind of my role, was figuring out, I could please people. And when you grow up figuring out the best way for me to get attention and good vibes from people is to do whatever they want and make their life easier, the side effect is you don't know who you really are. You're just whatever you need to melt into to please whoever's in front of you. So you really lose a sense of self. So I think it has been a journey for me to come to terms with how much of my own self I sort of gave away and make peace with the fact that that was the best I knew how to do. So healing for me in large part has been a reclaiming of my selfness. And we hear a lot in modern society about being so selfish and so self-involved, but my little joke about it is if I'm not ish about myself, if I'm not self-ish, who the hell is going to be ish about me?
Like that.
Who else is supposed to be selfish if not ourselves? And the real truth of it, when you break that dynamic, is that I can be so much more to other people when I'm actually being healthily selfish and giving myself that permission. So it's been a road of coming back to finding who I was, who I am, who all of the hard things shaped me to be, because I am stronger for going through those hardships.
When you first started as a therapist, were you still a people pleaser in a sense?
Oh God, yes. Painfully so.
How did that play out in terms of you being a therapist?
Well, I'll even go so far as to say, I think part of what is sick in our profession right now is that I think it draws in a lot of people pleasers. And I think we need more people to be more authentically who they are as healers instead of going with whatever narrative is popular at the time, whether that's in our profession or in our politics. So what was the question?
Well, the question was, when you first started out as a therapist, how did that people pleasing, what did that look like as you being a people pleaser?
It looked like neurotically trying to be the exact perfect therapist and counselor. It looked like trying to follow every guideline that any professor had ever given me. It looked like following those state codes to a T, even when I thought it was wrong. So I had to go through the experience of kind of being the good girl rule follower and wanting approval, because we go through supervision. That's what we call it in the field, right? Where we don't just go to school, get a degree, and then start holding space for people. We are supervised so that we're growing all along the way. On paper, that's great. I don't think I can come up with another strategy that works better than that. We need to be observed, and we really need that. But if you're a people pleaser, you're not growing into yourself. You're not necessarily stepping into what you think is right. You're doing what that authority figure tells you is right. And if you come from a family system where you had to do what the authority figure told you was right and they were dysfunctional, I didn't really know how to figure out what was functional or dysfunctional about either the people or the profession. So I people please. I tried to do it exactly right. Anybody who's a people pleaser is also a perfectionist. You can't humanly relate with perfection. We cannot relate to each other in any kind of perfect way. So right out of the gate, I think having that expectation was like shooting myself in the foot. So I was a very stressed out new counselor. I also was terrified about putting my own trauma on anybody else. So I kept up super boundaries. None of my early clients really knew anything about my personal life. And I think I needed to go through that and follow all the rules to be able to turn into somebody who knew which rules I really wanted to break.
Okay, hang on. So you're saying a lot here. So you have essentially a people pleaser. You have an ardent rule follower. And of course, we're not saying or advocating not to follow rules that need to be followed.
Yes.
But when that's getting in the way of what? Communicating, relating in a
connection
healthy,
and realness. Like I remember being a very green counselor and each state has a little bit of a different rule, which is proof that no one rule is right. They're just different. Right. But in Louisiana, you weren't allowed to receive any gift from a client at any value. In Texas, they have a $50 limit. Maybe they've raised that in recent years. So someone I helped very much was ending treatment with me and they brought me some little gift. I don't even remember what it was, but some very little reasonable an exchange, this human moment of you helped me and now I want to give this to you so that you can remember me and this honors our connection. And me being the good girl, rule follower, I said, oh no, I can't receive that gift. And that person melted in front of me. And I knew in my gut, that's wrong. That's not right. So I felt this immense conflict in moments like that of my intuitive, heartfelt self going, that is not right. That dishonors this human connection. And if we're not having an honoring of the human connection, what the hell are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Like, so I could see that I hurt that person by rejecting that gift. And right there in that moment, I said, I'm never going to do that again. Now, certainly if someone had handed me keys to a car, I would have said too big of a gift. You can't do that. But from that moment on, I would accept those very graciously. And I realized how important that was to just putting the period on the sentence of our work, to allowing that person to give to me. I gave them something and it was right for them to give me something, not just that financial exchange, something emotional. And so I allowed myself to grow out of the people pleasing, which is very much a please authority figure, tell me I'm the good girl. I very much practice what I preach. If anybody listens to Emotional Badass, I say it all the time. Healing is about stepping into becoming our own authority figure. So I had to let go. I had to learn the rules to then step into being my own authority figure instead of giving that sense of authority to a professor or to a state board or to a supervisor at a job, so that I could really honor my own moral compass, because I'm the one putting my head on my pillow at night. So that really encouraged me to help me get more real as a human being, separate from my work and in my work with people.
How did you, that was a really good example. And I realize things don't just turn on a dime. You don't automatically have one experience and then things change. Oftentimes that doesn't happen. But how did you start to gain trust in and confidence and love who you are as a person, enough so that you were more real in your interactions, in your therapy interactions?
I don't think I could have done it on my own. It was in part the people around me who saw me better than I knew how to see myself. I had mentors and teachers all of my life, teachers all throughout my development. I mean, from kindergarten on up through college, who absolutely took a special interest in me all along. I think when I was younger, they could sense that something was not right in my family, and teachers very much mothered me. They hugged me. They would just say things to me that seemed to tell me that they saw me. One said, not all of us have really soft, kind mothers, and just stuff like that, that it was like, okay, somebody sees me. Mm-hmm. So as I went through college, I went through graduate school, certain things happened and certain professors lifted me up. Like I had always felt like the dum-dum in math class, always, just because I think I was too stressed out for my brain to be able to do math. When I finally got into college, I hit a math class and I was acing the tests. To the point of me going to the teacher and saying, I promise I'm not cheating. And she's like, I know you're not cheating. And I'm like, no, really, I need to tell you that I'm not cheating because I can't believe I'm not cheating because I've been the math dum-dum. And she's like, you're going to have to face the fact that you're not the math dum-dum, that you're actually really good at math. And I had never, ever allowed myself to think that I could be good at that. It was just a period kind of end of conclusion that I was bad at that. And it wasn't true. So I started to allow people who saw me, because people reflect back at us, right? And I started having to face the fact that the strong people that were the most real to me would go out on a limb and say something real to me. And I started realizing that was more impactful.
Like what? Real like what?
Like I had a college supervisor, his name was Gus, and he looked like Santa Claus. He even had a cane. And there was another professor who just had a beef with me, who just didn't want to sign off on a class that I needed to graduate. And he fought for me. And I had to really sit with the fact that if he fought for me, there was something valuable about me. And he had to sit me down and say, there are people that are going to be scared of you because you're very intimidating, because you're good at what you do. And I was so green at the time that was really hard to take in. I thought, intimidating. I don't feel confident at all. How the hell can I be intimidating? This isn't real. So the third or fourth person that tells you that, you kind of can't deny it. It's like all these people can't be a liar. So I had people really step in for me and basically make me see myself. They wouldn't settle for anything else. And I think in counseling and therapy, we give so much power directly and indirectly, as if one person can heal themselves completely just by coming and talking. And we certainly can do a lot. It's certainly our responsibility, but we are reflected in the people that are around us. So part of what saved me was that I didn't stay in the same reflection ponds. In my family of origin, all that was reflected back at me was dysfunction. In other circles, my values started to be reflected back at me. People would just compliment me. Oh, Nikki, you're really good at that. Am I? I never thought of myself as good at that. So I'd have to take in evidence that started proving to me over time that I was good at it.
Concurrent with all of this, were you in therapy?
I have almost always been in therapy, almost always, from being a little girl with night terrors. It was one thing. People tend to not understand this about really dysfunctional families. Sometimes you go to therapy the whole time in a dysfunctional family. My mom would always have a therapist. I have this saying that narcissists don't pay for therapy, they pay for an audience. So my mom would pay for an audience. And then when that audience had a confrontation for her, like, hey, maybe part of this is you, she'd fire that person and go find another audience. So she always stuck me in therapy because I had night terrors. I was depressed. I was anxious. I had problems. It wasn't because of her. There was a dissonance there, but she wanted to look like a good mother. And she decided somewhere along the way that a good mother puts her kid in therapy. So that's a good story to tell other people. Oh, yeah, I put Nikki in therapy. She wouldn't do what the therapist said. She wouldn't meet me halfway. So I've been in therapy since being an elementary school student, very, very young, all the way through.
That's so interesting that, I mean, unfortunate that you've had those particular mentors and people who saw you. And it's also fortunate that you were able to hear them, you know, because a lot of times we don't maybe see the people who we're reflecting. We don't hear them. We don't even believe them.
I think that's the tragedy of trauma. It really is. I said this the last time we talked. It really isn't those moments of abuse the way that it seems like. If somebody's being beaten, that would be the worst moment. If someone's being sexually violated, that would be the worst moment. It's in all the days of our lives. It's in the summation of, did anybody really see me? And how crazy it feels, truly crazy, if nobody really sees our real self, our value, and reflects that back at us.
Right. Yeah. And it's, you know, oftentimes for a client walking into the therapist's room, of course, that takes so much courage in and of itself. But being there and maybe hearing the therapist say, you know, you're not crazy, you are valuable. And, you know, a lot of times clients are like, really? No, I don't believe that, you know?
That's what we're unraveling, I think, when we're good at this job. Increasingly, I am seeing people, and I'm mad at our profession. I am straight up mad at our profession. I am increasingly seeing people who have been deeply medicated since 5 and 8 years old, all of their lives. How the hell are they supposed to know themselves? So increasingly what I'm saying to people is, what if you're not as sick? You're not as broken as you've always been told you were since you were a child. What a story to grow up with, that you are fundamentally, something is wrong with you, that you need to be medicated from being a very small child. I fundamentally disagree. I think we have fought to have less stigma around seeking help and allow around medication. And now we've gone way too far to over medicate like a large part of the population. So I watch it daily with clients. I go, what if you're not as sick? What if you're not as crazy? What if you're not as broken? And that's such a powerful idea to go, what if? What if I'm more okay than I've ever let myself believe? What if the outside world is crazier than anything that's going on inside of my head? And I think those are the times that we're living through.
Yeah. You know, we're talking a lot about kind of believing in ourselves, honoring ourselves, trusting ourselves. Why is this so hard? Why is it so challenging for a lot of us? Of course, there are people out there who, you know, this doesn't present a problem at all, but for many of us, it does.
I think our American culture, probably since World War II, has increasingly become more empty and empty and empty and empty. We are a culture of stuff. We are a culture of spending money, of consumption. We're not a culture of connection and rootedness. We don't celebrate our strength. Right now, today, 2022, the most popular thing is being a victim, not being strong, not overcoming. It's identifying with being the victim. So how are we supposed to really, truly see our strength, our forward motion, our resiliency, if we're focused on how victimized everybody is? So I think we're doing a lot that pushes against people knowing their true selves. Our adolescents are more depressed than ever because they have an empty existence. They're on screens all the time. Their parents work more than ever before in history. So that's more disconnection. It's more not being seen. It's more not being touched. It's more not being held. We're also not challenging people in healthy ways. Like, we need healthy challenge. I had the blessing, I think this is what saved my life, of living in a home with my grandparents. My mother always had custody of me, but she was kind of in and out. My grandparents died when I was 15 and then 17. They were really my functional parents. They were very stable as human beings. And my grandfather was a highly sensitive person. I believe that's kind of where I get it from. Mm-hmm. So I got to have a lot of sensitivity from an emotionally aware male growing up. And my grandmother.
What did that look like from your
That looked like my grandmother being the one that was the breadwinner, and she owned a bookstore. She owned a business, which is highly unusual for people that were born in the 1920s to have a female own her own business. And she also had 6 kids and 2 master's degrees. So my grandmother was wow, an amazing force of a woman. She also dressed and cut her hair like a nun. So she was a very interesting character. My grandfather she was tough. She was a hard ass, but she was fair and consistent. And there's a lot to be said for that. You know where you stand with somebody like that. Mm-hmm. You can count on them. Even when she was too tough with me, I trusted her. Mm. It was hard, but it gave me a certain amount of grit. Different than a traumatic, dysfunctional hard. It was just her way. It was just her way. My grandfather, her husband, was he was a softie. He was a Navyman. His ship had gone down in World War II. One of my episodes is about his choice to not be codependent. He had PTSD. We didn't name PTSD till the 80s, but he certainly had PTSD. His ship went down. He floated in the water and he listened to his friends be eaten by sharks.
Oh my God.
He had to make the decision to swim away because people were being taken down by the sharks if they stayed huddled together. So that for me, like things like that my grandfather was strong, but he was sensitive. And I remember learning about codependency so many years later and going, oh my gosh, he made the most non-codependent decision and I wouldn't be here if he hadn't. Mm-hmm. But I would watch him cry. He was a big Mickey Mantle kind of baseball guy. I remember when those old guys died, my grandpa would sit there and cry. He would show me wonder. My grandfather valued wonder, and he brought me up with that. So he would grow strawberries and peanuts and giant sunflowers just to show me. He'd grow cotton and go, look, this grows. Come feel it.
It's amazing to hear you talk about him and what you noticed about him and how impactful he was in just who he was.
Oh, so impactful.
I lost you for a second there.
We're not valuing how wondrous. It's a very important word to me, wonder. We're not honoring how wondrous a child's development really is. And no matter how much hardship or heartache or trauma is happening to a small child, wonder is a huge part of resiliency. Mm. So no matter what was going on in my life, I could look at the smile of a child and feel delighted. There was hope there. I could look at the way that a bug lands on a flower and watch that flower move, and I could see the beauty and the wonder in it because I got to grow up seeing the world through his eye. Mm. This was a man who had a beautiful backyard in the city. He dug a pond himself before it was cool to have a pond. He would build bird houses for purple martins, who are very particular birds. They like very specific things, and they won't just go to any old birdhouse. And so he would build these very specific birdhouses, and then the squirrels would get them. So he'd go to war with the squirrels. And this is wrong. PETA would have my ass for this. But back in the late 80s, he would live catch the squirrels, and he would spray paint their tails different colors. And he would start by taking them 1 mile away to get and then all of a sudden he'd be drinking a cup of coffee at the window and he'd go, son of a bitch, there's that squirrel. And then he'd take them 2 miles away, and then they'd come back. And it wasn't until he took them 3 miles away. So he would do his own experiments before the internet, where you could just Google everything. So I got to grow up under that sense of wonder, under that sense of he could have died all those years ago and I wouldn't be here. I thought about that a lot as a little girl. Mm. And it made me value these little bitty moments that I could hold on to during the darkest parts of my life, during the deepest of my depressions. And I think that's part of what children and adolescents are maybe missing out with so much screen time and so much internet. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed this about movies lately. Almost all of the movies that are and TV shows that are being developed are in the 80s or before, because cell phones ruin life. They're boring. They're disconnected. None of us want to watch it on screen. We're watching cinema figure this out. So they're just showing us the time before cell phones. That's why this is being celebrated, in my opinion, because it actually takes us away. If your face is inside of a screen, you don't wonder at how that worm crosses the pavement. You don't know how to be so present with your world. And that really has been a big part of shaping me and saving me and growing me into the person that I am.
How does this appreciation and almost honoring of wonder and what we're talking about here, how does that play out in the therapist you are?
It plays out in a way that I don't want to over focus on what is depressing. I don't want to over focus on the problem. I'm a big time solution focused person, and I'm an experiencer. So often what I'll ask clients to do are very, very like wildly simple things. Wildly. Like I will say, instead of thinking about and writing about everything that depresses you this week, could you just go outside for 5 minutes a day and blow bubbles? Why, Nikki? What is that going to do? There's no good reason to blow bubbles except joy. That's why. And I don't know about you, but are you sick of focusing on what sucks? Yep. I very much believe that quote from Einstein. Let's see if I don't botch it. It's something like you can't solve the problem from the same consciousness that created it. And I think oftentimes in our field, therapists unfortunately do this. They enable the client to just stay in the funk. You just swarm the funk and swarm the funk and swarm the funk and swarm the funk and then go, gosh, why is it funky? Well, how about going somewhere else than in the funk? I often want people doing something with their hands. Okay. Especially young men. You know, we have all of this in the atmosphere right now because we just had another massive shooting. What does everybody want to do? Scream about guns. How about we let go of the male toxicity talk? How about we lift little boys up? How about we tell people what's wonderful about masculinity? What's strong and soothing and emotional, like my grandfather? How much love and support and kindness and energy is sent when a safe man opens his arms. As someone who was sexually violated by men in my youth and as a young adult woman, I don't believe I'd be where I am today without safe masculine energy, without strong masculine energy. I love and adore masculine energy, despite the males who have hurt me and despite the females that have hurt me. It's very bothersome to me that we don't talk about toxic femininity, but we talk about toxic masculinity. So we need to bring things like wonder. I look at all of those male shooters and I think, did anybody bring any wonder into his life? Did anybody ever like brush the side of his face and go, oh, sweet boy, come outside with me. Come get into nature. Let's build something. Let's fix something with our hands. Did anybody ever show that boy how to be purposeful? Did anybody ever tell him what was great about his masculinity? How he could use that for a greater good instead of darkness? So I think wonder is a much underutilized, powerful element to bring in.
Yeah, my God. It just really makes me think of how so easy it is for us not to value who we are, not to appreciate who we are, and instead just to ward off and to fight all these forces that are coming at us. Similarly, you're talking about not every therapist, of course, but there seems to be a habit of, having people just reiterate, what is the problem? What is the problem? What is the problem? And conversely, it's oftentimes very challenging for us just as human beings to say, to know what's great about me, what's great about us, what's great about living, where are these things that we can celebrate and honor. It's so true.
I think we've, as a society and as a profession, we've just fallen into that trap. You know, our humanness, we developed from caveman days to look at what was wrong in an attempt to stay alive, to be safe. But that's a survivorship. That's survival mode. I've had to heal post-traumatic stress in my life. So it is very clear to me that I had to teach myself how to not be in survival mode. And if you're only focusing on everything that's horrible, bad, awful, and sucky, how are you ever supposed to feel like you're thriving, that you're actually really living? Right. And to these younger generations that are growing up in this time of safetyism, well, isn't that the biggest irony? We have more safety than ever before, and yet people feel more unsafe than ever before. This is insanity. And we have to stop promoting it as therapists, as the people that are supposed to guide people to what healing is. We can't just let them circle the drain of their own crap and then wonder why they stay feeling crappy. But it takes a lot of courage to redirect. A lot of therapists, again, that people pleasing. Right. Someone said to me this morning, Nikki, can you soften that? Because I was talking about loving firmness. I said, why do you need it to be softer? Why do you need it to be softer? Sometimes we have to say to that critical voice, stop it. That's enough. I've tried it your way, critical voice. I've paid a lot of attention to this problem. Hasn't shifted it at all. So are we really going to say that the solution is staying with the problem? No. Let's stop. Let's shift. We have to learn the difference between being critical with ourselves and being lovingly firm.
This really sounds to me like this is coming from someone, from you, who really has kind of gone to the other side and understands the value of, not being a people pleaser and really valuing who you are and the imperfections and the beauty of being a real person, not having to, follow everything to a T. And as a result, really connecting with that person in front of you.
Well, and I'm tough. And I think therapists get confused about the interplay of being kind of soft place to fall, and also a little bit tough. And I'm a believer that people need a little bit of toughness in this world. We can't just lay naked in the street and expect to be A-okay. We need a little tough skin. We need some coverage. I often say this to people. I will let people tell their story. I will let them tell me their problem. But at a point I say, I don't want to listen to you position yourself as the victim, even when you're paying me, because it won't serve you. And frankly, I don't want to listen to it because I know it doesn't go anywhere except digging the hole deeper. So do you want to work with me? Do you want me to help you learn how to process this differently? Because I think you're working with me to learn how to do this differently, right? Will you let me help you learn how to do this differently? Or do you want to show up to me with the same old, wondering why you can't change? It's an interesting thing that people show up going, I need to change. We go, great, let's change some things. Wait, slow down. Actually, I just want to talk about it. At a point, talk is cheap, y'all. Right. At a point, talk is a distraction. At a point, overthinking is a luxury. And you got to tell yourself, stop. What do I need to do right now? And maybe it's you got to go outside and blow bubbles.
Awesome, Nikki. You are on fire. You're on fire. Talking with Nikki Eisenhauer. Her podcast is Emotional Badass. What's happening for you in terms of the work you're doing, the podcast, in the next coming months?
Well, I am working on an episode about what I love about masculinity. So that's kind of why it came out of me here. I release episodes every single week. What we are promoting, me and my team, is my boundaries course. I teach boundaries in part, like we talked about today, because I am a bit of a rule breaker. And so I help a lot of people and a lot of therapists figure out what rules they want to follow in their life that serve them and which ones they want to break. Mm-hmm. It's why I think I am a good fit for teaching boundaries. I'm passionate about boundaries because I wouldn't be where I am without them. So many people think a boundary is wagging your finger at somebody else and telling them, this is the line and you better not cross it. I fundamentally disagree with that. And I loathe the amount of people that are out there online talking about boundaries and touting that. Okay. That's a request. Okay. Because what that way of being does to people is they get real brave, they set a line, and then somebody looks them dead in the face and steps right on over it. And then they're left to go, oh shit, what do I do now? I set that boundary and this person crossed it. That's a request. A real boundary to me is about what's inside of your control. And most of the boundaries that we need are not really with other people. It's with ourselves. I have needed emotional boundaries with this inner perfectionist in my head. I've needed to learn how to say, no, stop, enough, and really slam the door and lock it sometimes to that inner perfectionist or that inner hypercritic. Mm-hmm. We need a lot of boundaries with ourselves to learn when to not people please, to learn how to say no. So I do a lot of teaching about what it is to have these boundaries within yourself, and then that nuance of how to set these boundaries with other people in the world. But those boundaries have to be within your control. Mm-hmm. We cannot control another human being. And I am increasingly asking people to not position themselves as the victim of other people's language, no matter the topic, because you have no control over what's going to come out of somebody else's face hole, y'all. No control at all. So if that's going to hurt you, you need some resiliency, in my opinion, and you need some emotional boundaries, because a boundary is exactly what you think it is. It's like the door to your house. You don't go to bed with your door unlocked. You lock it because you decided somewhere along the way that's smarter than keeping it unlocked, and you want to be able to keep the outside world out. Well, what thoughts do you want to keep outside of your own consciousness that don't serve you? So I'm very passionate about teaching boundaries. I teach it live for 6 weeks, once a year, and I do it every October. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can find out more about that at emotionalbadass.com. And that's the thing that I look forward to teaching every single year. And I go into my story. I teach a lot. I get very personal in there, and people can ask me any questions about any part of my life. As long as it's not a waste of time and I deem it therapeutic, I'll answer.
And who's the course for?
The course is for anyone open to the public. It's another beef I have with our profession. I tried to get this course under my National Counseling Board for continuing education for therapists. They would not do it for me because I also let the course be open to the public. They said that it could not be graduate level work. And I found that very insulting that I'm not allowed to teach therapists and the layperson together. I don't understand why you need to have a master's degree to have some kind of gatekeeping into this higher level education. So therapists out there that want to learn from me, you are welcome to be in that group. You will be in that group learning with other therapists and with other non-therapists. And that's a really good space to learn for all of us. I very much agree and love learning from difference and learning together. We don't get any kind of little perfect groups out in the real world in life. So sometimes the way that becomes an effective space for people is that if somebody has bad behavior, I teach it like a big college classroom. You get to see me handle it in real time. And often behind the scenes, that's what people will tell me. They'll go, oh my gosh, that was better than the stuff you were teaching. Because that's what I need to be able to do in real life. Because y'all know if you're in a group, there's always going to be somebody who just doesn't get politeness or not taking up too much space. And that, to me, that's really the nitty gritty of what we need to learn, not just as trauma survivors, but as human beings. At this point, we have to see each other in action to really learn. That's the nature of how we've always learned. So I'm very much a multi-layered teacher. So therapists out there, if you want to learn from me, it's no dirty secret. Come learn with me. You can look at my software. You can ask me later why I picked that software. You can learn in any way that you need to from me. Therapists like to see how I'm sharing my story and how I keep that therapeutic with my clients instead of just dumping my story on people. So there's a lot of nuance to pick up from me. Basically, if you like listening to hearing me chat, you'll probably like my course.
I'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. The Boundaries course for 2022. You can enroll in that. Nikki, thank you so much for being here. More than a breath of fresh air, a force of nature. You are like I think your grandmother, you said she was incredible, and your grandfather. Just really appreciate you and everything you're doing. The podcast, once again, is called Emotional Badass. Check that out. Nikki, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Guy.
All right,
so
take care.
much.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.